And 4 years ago, I tried to take my life, and it wasn't for attention.
Right.
I just couldn't.
Oh, Mrs. O.
You couldn't bear it.
Oh, I was just really broken in every sense. I said to Ozzy, if you ever do this to me again, I'm gonna cut your hair off or I'm gonna cut all your clothes.
Because I'm 63 years of age, and I can't keep living like this.
Sharon Osbourne just confirmed what we all feared about Ozzy Osbourne. But the real story isn't about what happened to him. It's about what watching him slowly die did to her.
So I went to a place to give me help, and the one thing that shocked me into like, come on, Mrs., you gotta get this together.
What drove the woman who managed rock stars, television careers, and family crises for decades to that breaking point?
We already all suffering?
Yes, we all are, but I don't want it to actually hurt as well. Mental suffering is enough pain without physical, so if you've got mental and physical.
The woman who managed everything was being destroyed by something she couldn't manage, and it nearly her before it him. When Ozzy Osbourne died on July 22nd, 2025, just 17 days after his farewell concert, people started asking questions. The timing felt too convenient, too planned, and Sharon's previous statement suggests they'd been planning this ending for much longer than anyone realized.
Whatever it was, where you know you're only going to die through it, we would want to choose the time that we want to leave.
You would both go together?
Oh, I'd go with my old man. He'd come with me.
This interview was from 2007. Back then, most people assumed they were joking around or being dramatic for attention. But 18 years later, with Ozzy dead just weeks after his farewell concert, those words take on a completely different meaning. Think about it. Ozzy performed one final show, got to say goodbye to 42,000 fans, reunited with Black Sabbath for the first time in decades, and then died peacefully at home just over 2 weeks later. That's not how terminal illness usually works. That's how planned exits work.
But she divorced him because of you?
No, because of the drink. She couldn't take it anymore, and I get it.
Sharon had watched addiction destroy relationships before. She understood when someone reached their breaking point. And by 2025, those same warning signs were showing up in her own behavior and statements about their marriage. The suspicious part isn't that Ozzy died. The suspicious part is how controlled everything was. The timing, the location, the peaceful family statement. For a man who'd lived chaotically his entire life, his death was remarkably organized. Sharon had spent decades managing Ozzy's chaos, his addiction, his career, his health, his public image. It makes sense that she would try to manage his death too. The question is whether she managed it completely naturally or whether there was more intervention than anyone wants to admit. The farewell concert wasn't just a goodbye to fans. It was Sharon giving Ozzy one last moment of being the Prince of Darkness before he became just another sick old man. She orchestrated his final public appearance, and then he died privately on her timeline, not his body's timeline. For over 40 years, Sharon Osbourne controlled every aspect of Ozzy's existence. She managed his money, his career, his sobriety, his relapses, his medical care, and his public image. But her final role was the most controversial of all, managing his death.
It's called Parkin 2. It's a gene that Ozzy was born with. And of course, Ozzy couldn't get anything normal. It's very rare. And its path isn't like normal Parkinson's that we all know.
Even during interviews, Sharon was micromanaging every detail. She couldn't let him appear imperfect for even a moment. This level of control extended to everything: what he said, how he moved, when he appeared publicly. Sharon didn't just manage Ozzy's Parkinson's symptoms, she managed the narrative around his condition, carefully revealing information in doses that maintained public sympathy without exposing the full horror of his situation. She turned his deterioration into a managed media story. But here's where it gets controversial. Sharon also managed who got access to Ozzy during his final years. Family members have hinted that she controlled visitation, controlled medical decisions, controlled everything about his care. Some people close to the family questioned whether Ozzy was making his own choices or whether Sharon was making them for him.
You know, it's like, we can make it work.
I mean, I wouldn't imagine that you're ever a shrinking violet in any relationship, Sharon.
Oh no, as hard as Ozzy would hit me, I would clobber him back.
Sharon was never passive in their relationship. She fought back, she made demands, she controlled situations. When Ozzy was physically and mentally strong, this dynamic worked. But when he became completely dependent on her for basic survival, that same controlling nature became something much more complicated. The controversial question nobody wants to ask is this: in Ozzy's final months, was he living according to his own wishes, or was he living according to Sharon's management plan? When someone controls every aspect of another person's existence for decades, the line between care and control disappears. Sharon's 2016 attempt reveals how much pressure she was under trying to manage the unmanageable. But it also reveals how completely responsible she felt for every aspect of Ozzy's existence. She couldn't bear watching him suffer, but she also couldn't bear not being in control of his situation. The timing of his death, the peaceful family statement, the perfectly managed farewell concert, all of this suggests that even Ozzy's death happened according to Sharon's plan, not according to natural disease progression. Whether that's comforting or disturbing depends on how you feel about one person having that much control over another person's life and death. Sharon gave Ozzy dignity in his final years by managing his public image, but she may have also given him death on her timeline rather than his body's timeline. That's a level of management that goes far beyond typical spousal care. While the world thought Ozzy was managing his Parkinson's with occasional bad days, the reality was that Sharon had been running a complete medical operation disguised as a normal household. Ozzy hadn't made a real decision about his own life in 6 years. Ozzy wasn't just sick.
I've been laid up for like 6 years. And it's so, you've got no idea how I feel. Man, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
He was completely dependent. When someone is bedridden for 6 years, they're not making decisions about concerts, interviews, or medical treatments. Someone else is making those decisions for them. Sharon had essentially become Ozzy's sole decision maker while maintaining the public fiction that he was still the Prince of Darkness making his own choices. Every public appearance, every statement, every medical decision went through her. Ozzy became a character that Sharon was playing rather than a person making his own choices.
How's your mobility these days?
Not great, but I mean, I have to negotiate everywhere I'm going to go, you know. And I tire easily, but I'm well. My family have been absolutely wonderful while I've been laid up.
Someone who needs strategic planning for basic household navigation isn't making complex decisions about career, medical care, or end-of-life planning. The controversial reality is that Sharon was making all those decisions while maintaining the public pretense that Ozzy was still in charge of his own life. She spoke for him, decided for him, and managed every aspect of his existence while he became increasingly unable to participate in those decisions. This wasn't just medical care. This was complete life management. Sharon decided when Ozzy appeared publicly, what he said in interviews, which medical treatments he received, who he saw, where he went. She became his voice, his decision maker, and his public face.
These metal plates were working their way out. The debris was rubbing on his spinal cord. He would literally be crying in pain some days.
When someone experiences that level of daily agony, they're not making rational decisions about their own care. They're desperate for relief, which means they'll agree to whatever their caregiver suggests. Sharon wasn't just managing Ozzy's care. She was making decisions for someone who was too desperate and too compromised to make them himself. The 6 years of hidden control explain why Ozzy's death felt so managed and controlled. Sharon had been making every decision about his life for years. His death was just the final decision in a long series of decisions that she'd been making without real input from him. Whether this was protective care or controlling manipulation depends on your perspective. But it's clear that by the time Ozzy died, Sharon had been his decision maker much longer than he'd been his own decision maker. She didn't just manage his death, she'd been managing his life completely for years. The pressure of managing every aspect of another person's existence while watching them suffer daily almost destroyed Sharon completely. Her 2016 breakdown reveals how the burden of total control was slowly the controller.
4 years ago, I tried to take my life, and it wasn't for attention.
Right.
I just couldn't.
Oh, Mrs. O.
You couldn't bear it.
Couldn't bear it.
28 years of professional psychiatric care, and Sharon still reached a breaking point. This wasn't about learning to cope with Ozzy's diagnosis. This happened in 2016, 4 years before they told the world about his Parkinson's. Sharon was already being destroyed by the secret burden of managing his condition. The timing reveals everything. Sharon's attempt occurred when she was carrying the full weight of Ozzy's hidden deterioration while maintaining the public fiction that everything was manageable. She was making life and death decisions for someone else while being unable to make life and death decisions for herself.
So I went to a place to give me help. And the one thing that shocked me into like, come on, Mrs., you got to get this together.
What saved Sharon wasn't hope that Ozzy would improve. It was realizing that her death would destroy her children the same way these young women had been destroyed by their mothers. Sharon's decision to live wasn't about fixing her situation. It was about accepting that she would continue managing an impossible situation for her children's sake. But this also reveals the depth of Sharon's sense of responsibility. She felt personally responsible for Ozzy's condition, for managing his care, for protecting their children from the truth, and for maintaining their public image. She was carrying the entire weight of their family's survival while slowly being crushed by that burden.
I was just really broken in every sense. I said to Ozzy, if you ever do this to me again, I'm going to cut your hair off or I'm going to cut all your clothes.
This wasn't just about marital problems. This was about complete systemic breakdown of someone who had been managing impossible situations for too long. Sharon's threats reveal how she understood that his identity was the only leverage she had left. The controversial aspect of Sharon's breakdown is what it reveals about their dynamic. She wasn't just caring for a sick husband. She was managing someone whose condition was actively destroying her mental health while feeling completely responsible for keeping him alive and maintaining their family's public image. Sharon's recovery allowed her to continue managing Ozzy's decline, but it also revealed how unsustainable their situation had become. She chose to live for her children, but she also began preparing for an endpoint where both she and Ozzy could stop suffering together. This pact they discussed wasn't just about Ozzy's condition. It was about Sharon's recognition that she couldn't manage his decline indefinitely without it destroying her completely. Her 2016 attempt was practice for what she thought might eventually become necessary for both of them. For years, Sharon and Ozzy announced plans to move back to England that never materialized. These weren't simple relocation failures. They were attempted escapes to a country where Sharon could legally implement the exit strategy she'd been planning for years. This wasn't bad luck.
Well, we're trying to get on a flight.
Yeah, it just seems that every time we're set to go, something happens with Ozzy's health, and so we'll get there. We want to go back so bad, but we'll get there. Won't we?
This was Sharon trying to move a completely dependent person to a country with different laws around end-of-life care. Each medical crisis made travel impossible, while making their need for legal options more urgent. Sharon's desperate tone reveals this wasn't about homesickness. England represented access to assisted dying organizations like Dignitas in Switzerland, which serve UK residents. Sharon was trying to get Ozzy to a place where their pact could be legally executed if his suffering became unbearable. The repeated failures weren't just about Ozzy's deteriorating condition, they were about Sharon's increasing isolation in managing his care. In America, she was trapped by laws that prevented her from implementing the exit strategy she'd been discussing with Ozzy for years. Sharon's reassurances were either self-deception or deliberate misdirection. She was planning to leave behind children and grandchildren indefinitely, which suggests she understood this might be a one-way trip. The controversial aspect of these escape attempts is what they reveal about Sharon's long-term planning. She wasn't just managing Ozzy's daily care, she was trying to position them geographically to have legal options for ending his suffering that weren't available in the United States. Each canceled trip represented another door closing, another option disappearing. Sharon watched their choices narrow until the only thing left was to wait and see how much suffering Ozzy's body could endure naturally. She couldn't control his disease progression, but she was desperately trying to control their legal options for ending it. The failed moves also reveal how much Sharon was willing to sacrifice for Ozzy's comfort. She was prepared to leave behind everything they'd built in America for the possibility of giving Ozzy a controlled legal death. That level of planning goes far beyond typical end-of-life care. By the time Ozzy died naturally in July 2025, Sharon had spent years trying to get him to a place where she could legally help him die if his suffering became became unbearable. His natural death may have spared them both from having to execute a plan that Sharon had been working toward for years. The escape attempts weren't about finding better medical care. They were about finding legal permission to implement the pact they'd been discussing since 2007. Sharon's failure to relocate them meant that Ozzy's final months were spent enduring suffering that she might have been able to legally end if they'd been in a different country. Ozzy's farewell concert on July 5th wasn't just a career milestone. It was Sharon's final act of management, giving Ozzy one last moment of dignity before implementing the exit strategy she'd been planning for years. This wasn't spontaneous.
And I don't know what to say, man. I've been laid up for like 6 years. And it's so, you've got no idea how I feel. Man. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
It was a carefully orchestrated event that required a year of planning around Ozzy's severe limitations. Sharon wasn't just organizing a concert, she was creating a controlled environment where Ozzy could say goodbye to the world on her terms. The fact that Ozzy died just 17 days after this performance suggests the concert represented more than a career farewell. It was Sharon giving him one final moment of being the Prince of Darkness before she helped him transition from public figure to private death. Consider the logistics required to get a bedridden man onto a stage for a full concert. This required medical teams, specialized equipment, pain management protocols, and backup plans for every possible emergency. Sharon essentially turned that concert into a major medical operation disguised as a rock show.
And when Jack said that he was getting divorced, Ozzy cried because he said, "I'm crying for you because I know how painful it's going to be because I've been through it and I don't want you to experience that pain."
In one of Sharon's final interviews about Ozzy, she revealed his hypersensitivity to all forms of pain. A man who cried at the thought of his son experiencing emotional pain was clearly someone whose own physical pain had become unbearable. This level of suffering makes the timing of his death feel less coincidental and more managed. The controversial aspect of the final concert is how perfectly it served as closure. Ozzy got to reunite with Black Sabbath, perform for 42,000 fans, and say goodbye to his career on his own terms. Then he died peacefully at home just over 2 weeks later. That sequence feels orchestrated rather than natural. Sharon had spent years trying to move Ozzy to a country where she could legally help him die. When those plans failed, the farewell concert became her alternative, giving him one final moment of dignity before his natural death, which may not have been entirely natural. The concert allowed Ozzy to die as the Prince of Darkness rather than as a broken man crying from pain. Sharon orchestrated his final public appearance to preserve his legacy, and then he died privately on what felt like her timeline rather than his disease's timeline. Whether Ozzy's death 17 days after his farewell performance was purely coincidental, or whether Sharon found other ways to help him avoid prolonged suffering, only she knows. But the timing feels too convenient to be entirely natural, especially given years of discussions about choosing when to leave and choosing the time they wanted to go. The woman who had managed every aspect of Ozzy's life for over 4 decades also managed his death, protecting his dignity, preserving his legacy, and possibly sparing him from suffering that had already become unbearable years earlier. Sharon Osbourne's greatest controversial act wasn't saving Ozzy's life. It was possibly helping him end it on his own terms while keeping the truth of his final years private. The world remembers the Prince of Darkness, not the man who spent 6 years bedridden and crying from pain that no medicine could touch. Anyway, that's it for the video, folks. Bye.